I had to make odds. It's 1,000,000,000 to 1 that I put Jon Jones on the White House card. Francis isn't a good guy. He won't be. We'll never be in business together. We offered Francis a deal that would have made him the highest paid heavyweight in the history of the company, and he turned the deal down. I think his eyes are okay. Yeah.
Jon Jones fighting again in the UFC? There's about a 1 in a billion chance. Tom Aspinall can't see. He's blind. Francis Ngannou is crazy for walking away from the UFC. Those aren't internet rumors. They aren't fan theories. Those are Dana White's own words, spoken publicly, on record. And somehow, all three statements point to the same uncomfortable truth. The UFC Heavyweight Division is broken. And it didn't collapse overnight. It was dismantled piece by decisions, egos, timing, and control. The heavyweight title is supposed to be the crown jewel of combat sports. It represents the baddest man on the planet. For decades, that belt meant clarity. One champion, one division, one king. But over the last several years, clarity has vanished. The division has drifted into chaos, confusion, and contradiction, leaving fans asking a question the UFC hates answering. How did the most important division in the sport become this unstable? To understand the disaster, you have to rewind to the last moment when everything made sense. In 2018, Stipe Miocic was quietly building the greatest heavyweight resume in UFC history. He defended the title more times than anyone before him. He knocked out legends. He showed durability, composure, and consistency in a division known for volatility. By any sporting metric, Stipe was the heavyweight standard. But there was a problem. He didn't sell like a superstar. The UFC has always balanced sport and business, but heavyweight champions who don't move numbers create tension behind the scenes. Stipe didn't talk trash. He didn't chase controversy. He showed up, fought, and went home. For fans who value competition, that was perfection. For promoters chasing growth, it wasn't enough. At the same time, something terrifying was rising through the division. Francis Ngannou arrived like a natural disaster. Every fight ended violently. Opponents didn't just lose, they were erased. His story amplified the danger. A man forged by poverty, sand mines, migration, homelessness, and desperation. He didn't look like a prospect, he looked like an ending. The UFC saw a solution to its heavyweight problem, a new star, a new era, a champion who didn't just win, but terrified. But even before Francis fought for the belt, cracks appeared. According to reporting later cited in a Harvard business case study, Ngannou asked for compensation that reflected his value, $500,000 and pay-per-view points. For challengers, that was unusual. For the UFC, it was uncomfortable. The title fight was booked anyway, Stipe Miocic versus Francis Ngannou, but the promotion felt different. The hype leaned heavily in one direction. Stipe noticed. He said it publicly. He felt disrespected. He felt like the UFC had already decided who the future was. Then the fight happened. Stipe didn't fear Francis's power. He prepared for it. He wrestled him, exhausted him, controlled him, and dominated him. When the final horn sounded, the heavyweight myth collapsed. Francis wasn't invincible, he was inexperienced, and the UFC's future plan took its first major hit. What followed made things worse. Instead of allowing Francis time to rebuild properly, narratives shifted fast. Public comments questioned his preparation, his discipline, his commitment. Then came the Derek Lewis fight, a fight that symbolized hesitation, fear, and indecision. The division stalled, fans turned, confidence fractured. Meanwhile, Jon Jones loomed in the background like a threat the UFC both wanted and feared. The greatest light heavyweight of all time, a walking headline, a walking liability. Failed drug tests, legal issues, suspensions, but also dominance that couldn't be denied. When Jones teased heavyweight, it froze the division. Contenders waited, champions aged, matchmaking slowed. Everything revolved around a fight that never happened. Jones wanted historic money. The UFC refused. Jones vacated his belt and disappeared for years. During that absence, Francis rebuilt himself, quietly, methodically. He returned better, smarter, more patient. When he finally got his second shot at Stipe, he didn't just knock him out, he evolved. Wrestling, defense, control. Francis Ngannou became champion. But the belt didn't bring peace, it brought conflict. Francis wanted security, he wanted freedom, he wanted guarantees that extended beyond one fight. He wanted the ability to box. He wanted changes that no champion before him had successfully demanded. The UFC saw a threat, not to profits, but to precedent. Injuries delayed his defenses. Interim titles appeared. Pressure increased. Then came Ciryl Gane. Francis fought injured, adapted again, and won, but the relationship was already beyond repair. And when Francis Ngannou walked away as champion, the heavyweight division lost its anchor. Dana White called him crazy, but what happened next would expose just how fragile the division had become.
Hit that subscribe button and like the video. Your support helps us keep the momentum alive. When Francis Ngannou walked out of the UFC as reigning heavyweight champion, the promotion did something it had never truly prepared for. It moved on publicly while privately scrambling for control. Dana White insisted the company didn't need any fighter. The brand was the star. The machine would keep running. But behind the confidence was a division suddenly missing its foundation. With Francis gone, the UFC needed a new, undisputed heavyweight champion immediately. Not eventually, not theoretically, immediately. And there was only one name big enough to justify skipping the usual process: Jon Jones. Jones had been gone for 3 years. No fights, no momentum, no proof his body could handle heavyweight competition. But none of that mattered. What mattered was legacy. What mattered was optics. Jones wasn't just another contender. He was the greatest of all time, returning to claim a second throne. The UFC built everything around him. The heavyweight division didn't get a tournament, it didn't get clarity, it got paused. Ciryl Gane, an interim champion just months earlier, was suddenly framed as a placeholder. Stipe Miocic, the most accomplished heavyweight ever, was sidelined. Tom Aspinall was rising fast, knocking out contenders in seconds, but barely mentioned. The message was clear: wait your turn. Jon Jones is coming. At UFC 285, Jones made his return against Ciryl Gane for the vacant title. The fight lasted just over 2 minutes. Jones took Gane down effortlessly and submitted him. On paper, it looked like domination. In reality, it raised more questions than answers. Gane had been out-wrestled before. Francis had done it with torn ligaments. Jones winning wasn't shocking. What followed was. Instead of defending the title against the most dangerous, most deserving contender, Jones immediately pivoted. He called out Stipe Miocic, not the interim champion, not the young knockout artist, not the future of the division. He chose the past. From a business standpoint, the UFC agreed. Stipe versus Jones meant legacy versus legacy, history versus history. It was safe, it was marketable, it avoided risk. And that decision froze the division again. Tom Aspinall won the interim heavyweight title in spectacular fashion. Fast, violent, efficient. Everything the heavyweight division is supposed to be. But instead of unifying the belts, he was told to wait. Then he was ignored. Then he was dismissed publicly. Dana White said Aspinall was basically blind after his injury. He said Jones fighting again was a 1 in a billion chance. He said the fans didn't understand how business worked. But the fans understood something clearly. The heavyweight champion wasn't defending against the best available challenger. The interim title meant nothing, and the division had no timeline. Months passed. Jones got injured. The Stipe fight stalled. Aspinall won the interim heavyweight title while the undisputed champion remained inactive. For the first time in modern UFC history, the heavyweight title felt theoretical. This wasn't just bad luck, it was the result of prioritizing control over competition. The UFC has always insisted that no fighter is bigger than the brand, but the heavyweight division kept revolving around singular figures: Brock Lesnar, Conor McGregor's influence on matchmaking, Jon Jones's leverage, Francis Ngannou's independence. Every time the UFC tried to force a narrative, reality pushed back, and the fans noticed the pattern. When Francis left, the UFC said he didn't want to fight Jon Jones. When Jones delayed, the UFC said injuries happen. When Aspinall waited, they said patience was required. Every explanation shifted blame away from structure and toward individuals. But structure is exactly where the problem lives. Interim titles were supposed to solve logjams. Instead, they became placeholders with no power. Champions were supposed to defend regularly. Instead, they became negotiators first, fighters second. Contenders were supposed to rise naturally. Instead, they were paused for optics. The heavyweight division became a chessboard where the pieces moved only when the promotion allowed it. Meanwhile, Francis Ngannou was gone, making more money in a single boxing match than he made across his entire UFC career. He didn't just leave, he succeeded, and that reality haunted every press conference that followed. Because the UFC didn't just lose a champion, it lost leverage. Suddenly, fighters saw alternatives. Suddenly, contracts were questioned. Suddenly, the heavyweight belt didn't feel like the final destination anymore. And as Jon Jones remained inactive, holding the title while the division waited, the unthinkable became obvious. The UFC Heavyweight Division wasn't cursed, it was managed this way.
By the time Tom Aspinall wrapped the interim heavyweight belt around his waist, the UFC Heavyweight Division had officially entered a strange new era, one where titles existed, but clarity did not. Aspinall had done everything right. He recovered from a devastating knee injury faster than expected. He returned sharper, more explosive, and more dangerous. And when the UFC put him back in the cage, he didn't ask for favors. He finished Sergey Pavlovich in just over a minute. That was supposed to force a decision. Historically, interim champions exist for one reason: to fight the undisputed champion as soon as possible. They are not consolation prizes. They are not marketing tools. They are placeholders meant to keep divisions moving. But in this case, the interim title became something else entirely: a stall tactic. Jon Jones still held the undisputed belt. He was injured, he was aging, and he was openly uninterested in fighting the most dangerous contender in the division. Instead, Jones continued to insist on one thing and one thing only: Stipe Miocic. From Jones' perspective, it made sense. Stipe was older, slower, more stationary. Beating him added legacy without adding danger. A win over Aspinall risked everything: youth, speed, explosiveness. A loss to Aspinall wouldn't just end Jones's heavyweight run, it would rewrite his legacy. So Jones waited, and the UFC let him. Dana White repeatedly said the heavyweight division didn't revolve around one man, but every public decision contradicted that statement. Aspinall defended his interim belt, Jones sat out, Stipe remained inactive, and the fans were told to be patient. But patience has limits. As months passed, the questions grew louder. Why wasn't the interim champion being promoted as the future? Why wasn't the belt being unified? Why was the most dangerous heavyweight on the planet fighting once a year while the champion fought 0 times? The UFC's response wasn't structural, it was rhetorical. Dana White downplayed Aspinall's importance. He suggested injuries made him unreliable. He dismissed fan outrage as online noise, and he framed Jon Jones's inactivity as unavoidable rather than strategic. But fighters saw something different. They saw that leverage mattered more than rankings, that negotiation power mattered more than merit, that the belt didn't belong to the best heavyweight, it belonged to the most valuable one. And this wasn't new. The heavyweight division has always been vulnerable to this kind of manipulation because of its scarcity. There are fewer elite heavyweights, fewer long-term contenders, fewer guaranteed stars. When the UFC finds someone it believes can carry the division, it protects them. That protection creates imbalance. Tom Aspinall became collateral damage in a narrative he didn't choose. He wasn't just waiting for a fight, he was waiting for permission. permission to be acknowledged, permission to matter. Meanwhile, the fans began doing what the UFC hates most. They started agreeing with Francis Ngannou. Francis had warned that the UFC controlled fighters through time, through inactivity, through clauses that froze careers. And now the heavyweight division was proving him right. The belt was stuck, the contenders were stalled, and the promotion kept insisting everything was fine. But numbers don't lie. The UFC had one undisputed heavyweight title fight in nearly 3 years. Interim belts meant nothing. Champions weren't defending, and the division that once defined the sport now felt hollow. Even worse, the UFC's backup plan didn't exist. If Jones retired, the belt would be vacated again. If Stipe lost interest, the fight disappeared. If Aspinall got injured again, momentum would vanish. Every scenario led to instability because the UFC had placed all its chips on one man's schedule. This was the opposite of depth. It was dependency. And while the UFC tried to sell the narrative of patience and legacy, rival promotions watched closely. The PFL didn't need to outspend the UFC. It just needed to offer freedom. Boxing didn't need to sign UFC champions long-term. It just needed to offer one night of opportunity. Francis Ngannou didn't just leave the UFC. He exposed its pressure points. As long as champions obeyed the system worked. But when a champion walked away, the system panicked. And when another champion delayed, the system froze. The heavyweight division became a waiting room. No urgency, no movement, just explanations. And for the first time, fans weren't arguing about who the best heavyweight was. They were asking a more dangerous question. Does the UFC heavyweight title still mean what it used to? Because if the best heavyweight isn't fighting the best available challenger, if interim champions aren't respected, and if negotiations matter more than competition, then the belt isn't cursed, it's compromised.
If you made it this far, you already know this isn't just about one fight. It's about power, control, and who really runs the heavyweight division. So do me a favor, subscribe if you want the stories the UFC won't tell you, and drop a comment. Should Jon Jones fight Tom Aspinall, or is the heavyweight title already broken? Let's see who's really paying attention.